Yeah, I mean, not because of any reason. I think I went past house.
I should say lights, camera, action. Well, thank you ever so much for coming along. I'm so taken aback by the fact you've bothered to come along this evening. So my name's Des Hewitt. I'm a professor of teacher education at Warwick University. So I've worked there for 10 years. In fact, I've just retired in the last year. Before that, I was professor of education at Derby University, where I was for 15 years. And then before that, I was a French teacher, language specialist, also with Junior. Got a keen interest in special education. And you can see one of the things that I still do, though I've just retired, is write books. So in fact, I've just been writing one today, a chapter about English as an additional language, which is about, you've just been talking about someone from Ukraine who's done brilliantly well here. Yeah. That's something I'm really, really interested in, and special education inclusion more generally. So tonight's talk actually is about, partly about me. I'm very happy to talk about my condition. So I've been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I also recognise that statistically, and you might correct me if I'm wrong here, something like 50% of people are going to be touched by cancer at some point in their lives. And that's you might have a diagnosis yourself. Both my parents died of cancer in their 70s. I'm 61. I was diagnosed 2 years ago with kidney cancer, and I'll show you some photos and the CT scans just in case you're interested to look at those. And I thought I'd be really, really interested, not really so much about the cancer as an illness, but how we talk about illnesses. And I'm almost dead set against this idea of talking about, remember when we had COVID and people used to say, like Boris, he's a real fighter, he's gone into battle. And so if you weren't a hardened street fighter, you weren't good enough, and you were beaten by the illness and all this sort of stuff. So inclusion more generally, I think, is about treating everyone with decency. Yeah. And I always say to them, my students, and Brittany is one of my old students, the main thing in life is always treat people with decency. Yeah. And if you do that, if you're a teacher in a school and you're working with the secretary, the caretaker, the head teacher, the director of education, or even Dina, you're doing the right thing. And I do believe, likewise, and I'm not particularly talking about names, but I go to the Derby Hospital for my treatment, and I won't talk about the names of the consultants there, but they've been absolutely superb. One of the things I want to talk about today is how we can treat people decently as patients. So I think very often we talk about compassion. So I'm going to talk about compassion, empathy, sympathy, and how that might be important for patients. For people like our friend here, what's your name?
Claire.
Claire. I think we should be very, very compassionate to people like Claire as well. And you'll see, I've got a few quotes throughout this about some of my beliefs. I would say I would call myself a Buddhist. I meditate at least twice a day, and that's helped me massively deal with the sort of hearing the guy outside in the corridor doing his round saying, this isn't going to be good news, coming in and saying, this is what you got, sort of thing. And how do you respond to that? I'll show you some of the sort of approaches that I've thought about there. I did a talk just like this at the Warwick Medical School on Monday of last week as part of their medical undergraduate degree, and I'll be doing that with their doctoral medical doctor students as well. So I think it's really, really important that we feel enabled to talk about something that's quite a tricky topic. As you'll see here, not knowing about your own backgrounds at all. Actually, by the way, that's a picture of me that I drew. And there is, you probably can't see it too well, but on the top it says Doris, and on the bottom it says Dave. And that's Dave, my kidney tumour there. Yeah. And Doris, that's my brain tumour, where it spread from here to there. And that I found out in January 2022. So my kids, first of all, they said, right, we've got to have a name for these tumours. So we called them Dave and Doris. And I thought at the time I was on a type of steroid called dexamethasone, which actually psychologically has quite a big impact on you, which I'll share a little bit later on as well. But actually I thought just drawing some pictures about these sort of things is a really good way of sort of trying to explain it. So I said to Dina that I'd bring some pictures along. I've even brought my sketchbook along, which has got some of the pictures of how I felt and sort of communicating what I looked like and everything at the time. So that's where Dave and Doris are. They are no longer there. They've all gone.
They're gone.
So literally, in December 2021, I had COVID on the 18th of December. I'm sure I caught it at the Christmas party at Warwick University, at the Christmas quiz. I had to self-isolate from the 18th of December to the 28th. So literally in those days, I was up in the spare bedroom. You know, your dinner was on a tray on the landing. And I managed to get through all that by watching the comedy programme Ghosts on repeats through my time upstairs. And at that point, I don't know why, but I started to feel a bit sort of wobbly on my feet, it's like this. And I even bought myself one of those wobble boards, you know, to sort of help you with your balance. I thought, this is a bloody strange, this is. And I thought, well, you know, maybe something just is odd going on there. And then I started to get these headaches. I thought, well, that's a bit odd. A bit strange, that is. And then I thought, well, you know, headaches, perhaps I ought to, like, test my blood pressure. So I bought one of those, like, electronic monitors. And it was, like, testing out at 250 over 100. And normally your blood pressure is around about 120, 130 over 80. So I thought, oh, that looks a bit odd. So I went to the GP, near to where I live in Albert Village. And he did a few tests, so they do this sort of thing, so like, you know, you look at a line, can you walk in a straight line? I was sort of going like this a bit. And also my guitar teacher, so I play classical guitar, so at the time I was playing some quite tricky music, but I had to revert back to very simple music like this, because I was finding it very difficult to read. And so I'd look at a line like this, and I'd play the line of music, really, really simple stuff. Then I'd find that I'd just like be playing the same line over and over again. God, that's a bit weird. And Chris, my guitar teacher in Ashby, he said to me, oh, Des, why is it that you're sort of leaning over to this side? Because normally you sort of play the guitar like this, classical guitar. Oh, that's a bit odd. And then when we were taking our dog out, we would go around the sort of block, and then my son would say to me, Dad, why is it you're sort of veering off into the middle of the road? And then the worst thing, my wife is always a very nervous driver, especially with me in the car. And I decided to take her to the Meatloaf the Musical in Birmingham. And when I was coming back, and she's always like holding onto the side like this, thinking, Dad's like, please don't kill me. We were going up the M42, coming back in the dark. And you know the bit when you normally have the sort of green cat's eyes on the side of the road where cars come on? She said, Des, you can't see the cars coming on at all. And I thought, there's something wrong here. And at that time as well, I was training, and I was doing this in Leicester, I was trained to become a Samaritan. Because my main aim really in life was to think, well, I've had this lovely career in education, I want to give something back. And I like people. That's why I love working with people like Brittany and love hearing all these sort of people here. I thought I'll do my training, which I did. And I went to Leicester Samaritans, and there's a bit there where you have to press a keypad to get in, and I could never do the keypad at all. And then you have to go upstairs, and each time I went up the stairs I seemed to trip with my left foot. And each time you receive a call, 3 rings, hello Samaritans, can I help you? And I do the 8 till 12 o'clock section. And then after you've done your half an hour call of it, is you have to write the details up. And I kept on, when I was writing with my left fingers, kept on hitting the caps lock. So it's like all coming out in capitals, or like coming out with spelling mistakes, all this sort of stuff. I thought, that's just bloody bizarre, that is. Worse still, at the time I was a season ticket holder for Leicester. and I was going up, walking, and there's some very steep steps to walk up to get to your seats. I remember walking up the steps, going past the first 2 or 3 steps, tripping, again with this foot, on the first step, and going headlong into someone's private parts. This old man, I thought, this is not helpful at all. And I sort of cut my finger here, and I thought, I've just got to do something about this. So at that point, I went to my GP. I think it was something like the 17th of January or so. Within a couple of weeks or so, I'd had an MRI scan, which is a sort of computer scan of your head, in Burton. And from there, they said, we just found something on your brain. So I didn't know that anything was going on at all. And they said, we're going to take you straight to accident emergency, because it's clearly... So I remember actually having these shoes on, because they got like zips and knots on, I couldn't do them up again because I'd lost all coordination. This belt here, when you go in to have a scan, because it's got metal on, you have to take it off, and I couldn't loop the belt through the loops at all. So I went along, saw the lady, lovely doctor called Charlotte, who explained to me about the details and everything, and said, and they always seem to use a term like a lesion. It's not a tumour, it's like called a lesion, or I've got some things on my lungs as well, which are called nodules as well. So they tend to use euphemisms quite a lot, I found. But from that point onwards, I discovered that I had cancer. And I'm very, very happy to talk about it. I think it's important that we do talk about it. Though I'm very committed to inclusion, and this is one of the books I've written about special needs, one here with Brittany that I wrote about motivation empowerment, because we both believe that people are really important, that we must empower people to have their own say in life. So I thought, why not put it into action? So again, I'm very, very happy to talk about these sort of things. I am a patient. I'm not a clinician. I am a professor of education who probably thinks he knows more than he does. And when I have got any medication, the first thing I go is go onto the internet. So I look at Professor Google immediately, like I'm sure a lot of your patients and people do. So even the medication one, I've actually looked at the primary research papers and the cancer treatment I'm on at the moment. I've looked at that, and I've seen the kind of all this stuff about diagnosis and prognosis and all this sort of stuff. But I'm not a clinician. Although I would say I've probably got counselling skills, I'm not a counsellor. So I would always say, which I'm sure you would say as well, if you've got any worries, always talk to your health professional, your GP. Actually, I found Macmillan fantastic. I'm a living example of what a great organisation Macmillan is as well. And you'll see yourself starring up here as well. So this is a sort of spiral I often use with children going through trainee teachers, teachers, heads of departments, teacher trainers, professors, all this sort of stuff. And I've used the same diagram to plot the journey of us human beings. Because actually, and this is not being pessimistic, it's like reality, we're all going to die at some point. None of us know when that's going to be. One thing Buddhist people say is, every day you should say to yourself, I might die today. Not that it's necessarily going to definitely happen, but it might happen. And therefore, and actually, even before I sort of thought about, reading about these sort of things, even as a child, I very often used to read like French literature and stuff when I was doing my degree and everything. And I used to read someone called Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre, and they used to say, spend 5 minutes every day thinking about your own death. And that sounds really sort of morbid and everything. But what I think it does do, it reminds you of how precious human lives are. And isn't this a wonderful place to be sitting in to realise the importance of humanity and human beings? Which is, when I see people like Dina and Brittany and others who work in this fantastic community, I think that you bring the humanity and the soul to life. It's people like you that make a real difference. But what I would say is, we're all human beings. We all should treat each other with decency. And I will talk about how we react to the world. I love images and metaphors like this as well. So if you look at that picture, and if you think about yourself and life, which bit would you say you are, the ocean or that boat? Have a little chat between you. Or how could you interpret it? That's another good question.
And I'm the photographer.
You just said she's the weather.
She's the weather. So how do you think you could interpret that picture then?
I'd be terrified.
You'd be in the boat, would you?
I would.
Okay. So you're steering a boat over sort of life's sort of rolling, thunderous storms.
Yeah. The sea has its own currents, has its own movements.
Yeah.
Tides governed by the moon and the various currents there. So in some ways it's a self-contained unit, but the boat will hope to use control of the sea to. I used to in the past, don't do it anymore, do sailing, and you have to know how to adjust the sail and everything to move a boat through the sea, no matter what the tides or the wind and everything. So it's a merger of the two.
Yeah, that's interesting. So a bit like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the martial art called Aikido. With Aikido, it's not about brute force at all. It's about using someone else's sort of movements and energy, if you like, to just sort of channel it in a different direction. And actually, you've just given a really good description of the kind of captain on the boat can steer against the waves and the currents, and can sort of go with the currents to sort of make the journey a little bit easier. Any other thoughts or anyone else at all?
We had a phrase, a group of people that I used to work with, creatives, and our phrase was "be the water."
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And that's the image I very often like to draw out of this, is that if life's events are that boat that's going on this ocean, if you're that ocean that's going up and down like this all the time, and our brains are naturally wired to be problem solving, normally about 2 o'clock in the morning, so you're waking up thinking, oh my God, how am I going to pay that credit card? Or like, oh my God, I've got to do that talk at Colville Can on Wednesday night. Or you can be that ocean, if you like, so you're the ocean, if you like, just as the way that you've explained, and you can keep it as calm as possible, so that whatever comes in your direction, and it could be like you got a puncture in your car, and I can remember the times when I've had a puncture in my car, and I've been at home like slamming the doors and effing and blinding all over the show, or something as simple as like, I can't find my keys, Shirley, what am I going to do? Or it's like, well, I'm sorry, Des, but you've got cancer. And I'm not denuding the importance of serious illness or anything like that. And I'm also absolutely recognising that everyone responds to life in their own way, and that everyone has a story behind which they navigate their life. So my story with my parents is they both died. My mum died of ovarian cancer when she was 71. They lived in Weymouth. In fact, I was born on Portland, just around the corner from the Bibby Stockholm, that famous hotel on Portland. And my mum and dad went back to live on Portland, mainly because my mum loved going to shops where they would say, "How are you, my lover?" So I'll always remember that, not for ovarian cancer. But I always remember her seeing her the night before she died, when she was in the hospital. She was a kind of classic cancer patient who'd lost a lot of weight. And I was feeding her, and she said to me, "Desmond, isn't it so much like you're the adult and I'm the child now?" But I remember seeing her then, and then literally 2 weeks to the almost minute after she died, my dad died as well. And I went in to see him the night before, And I shook his hand, but we didn't say anything at all. And I just looked into his eye, and it was like, said everything. And I said to him, I'm really proud of you. And when I did the eulogy at his funeral, I held up a medal that he got in Korea, where he was in the Middlesex Regiment, and he was part of the United Nations. As a 17-year-old, he was too young, he shouldn't have been there. And he got that for fighting in Korea as part of the United Nations. And all he was, we were just talking about where we've all come from. He went on to become a ticket collector on a railway station. And he used to say to me, Des, like, what is it you do? Like, you work in some sort of university or something, is it? And I said to him, you know, my students at Warwick and at, you know, Derby, wherever I go to, you know, my dad was a ticket collector. Doesn't matter who you are, we can all, you know, do the best we can. And that's what my mum used to say to me, and that's what I'll try and do tonight as well. So in a sense, what I think I'm very interested in, actually the type of conversations you might have with some of the people that you speak to, is how we talk to people. I'm very interested in having lots of conversations, including when I was in Nottingham, when I had the brain tumour out here taken out. I had this fantastic lady, a Rastafarian lady, who came around every morning, almost the most important person in my life at that time. And she'd come in like a massive ball of fun and say, how you doing there, my lovely Desmond? And like, the only person in my life who's called me Desmond is my mum and my wife if she wants to tell me off. So I think these people are so important. So, you know, it's really important to look at these people. So actually, I don't know if it's got a later on there, but the sort of left-hand picture is me about an hour after I had my operation. So literally went to GP in January. 3 weeks after that, I was in the QMC in Nottingham, which is a neurosensory unit for the Midlands. And I had something called a tumour in my parietal lobe, which is part of your brain just behind the sort of front part of your brain here. I'm not a neurologist, but I do know that that part of your brain looks at things to do with your senses, coordination, and of course anything on that side of your brain impacts on that side of your body. So when I went to do my park run, so I've run 270 park runs or so now, I was running along, catching my foot on the left-hand side, and a guy behind me said, right, are you okay, mate? And I said, yeah, I think I'm all right. I think it was like I was drunk for the night before or something. And I went to the end, and I put my hand out, because they normally give you a token to see your position. And I looked at my hand and I thought, God, it's not there. So I went back to the lady saying that, you know, I think you must have missed me or something. I said, no, you just looked straight through me. So clearly this thing was affecting my vision. And actually, these trousers, which I did own back 2 years ago, I literally tried to put them on in the morning, and I couldn't put this foot, the right foot, into the into the right leg. So I'd lost any sense of coordination. So that when, you know, in sort of childhood we talk about laterality, so a sense of left and right. So that was sort of accounted for why I had those difficulties with playing the guitar. I still have some sort of limitations of vision now as a result of the operation that I had. So that was the operation. It looks like there's loads of blood there, but that's just like it's got a red wash, which is something they've just put over your head as part of the antiseptic aspect of the operation. In my case, and you can see the photo underneath, that's the after picture, and you can see the brain, so that's the right-hand side, that's the left-hand side. The bits, so I'll just go in front of the camera for this, the bit there is where there was a tumour. My wife likes to say that's the bit that says hoovering, because there's a big gap there now. And what happened with me, this thing must have been growing for ages and ages and ages, and I didn't know at the time, but it must have spread from the kidney, which I didn't even know that I had a tumour there at all. No. I think most tumours don't normally start in the head. you can get what they call primary tumours that do start in the head, which are generally quite serious as well and much more difficult to address. And at the time, they didn't know whether it was going to be a sort of primary tumour or a secondary one, which had come from somewhere else. And they said, well, if it's one that's originated from here, you've got about 13 months. So the day after that, I wrote my funeral service. And I thought, well, I'm going to go to J.S. Bach, because I like playing Bach. And I was like very, very practical on those sort of things. The only time I cried after this guy came in and told me that, you know, I've got another tumour, because they did a CT scan to see if there's anything else in my torso, was straight after that, thinking that I might not see my son over the next 10 years and what he might grow up into. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, there's that sense of loss that you get when you hear these sort of things. Mm-hmm. And worse still, looking out the hospital window to see a barren tree with something looking like a flag, which was actually toilet paper. Oh. And I thought, oh my God, this is like I've just gone to Death Valley or something like that. But, I mean, actually, I didn't feel particularly dejected or anything like that. I think, as you'll probably know when you're working with people, there's a huge sense of uncertainty. And if you, once you have these scans, so an MRI scan is something for the head, a CT scan is something normally, which for me is from here to here. They would normally do that every 3 months or so. When they had the various operations to take out the tumour on my head, they would do other scans to sort of pinpoint exactly where it was. And what they did is they with an electric saw, I know this because a trainee doctor came to me the next day and said, I've just seen the inside of your brain. And I was quite happy to talk about that. So they basically took a flap of bone out and then basically stapled it back in with some sort of see-through staples that just dissolve after a bit. And honestly, apart from the fact I'm still balled up here, you wouldn't really know that there's been any operation on my head. And the lasting impact is that the weekend, so that was on a Wednesday. I came out of hospital on the Saturday, so literally like 3 or 4 days or so. Felt fine. And then I was like, and they put you onto these steroids called dexamethasone, which are ones you'll probably have heard about linked to COVID. They are so powerful. And I was on, I think, 4 in the morning, 4 at lunchtime, 4 in the evening or so. And what they do is they reduce swelling. So when you have a tumour to start with, it generally generates a lot of swelling. And in my case, the left-hand side of my brain was pushed complete to one side, which is why it's having an impact. And then the functional aspects of the brain, depending on where it is, will also be impacted on. So because the parietal lobe is the bit that controls your visual spatial awareness, things like left and right. So I'd know, for instance, if I turn around, I could normally sort of push the light switch in our living room. I wouldn't be able to do that at all. So the doctors, very often, they would say, you know, there's my finger there. Put your finger there, close your eyes and try and put it back to your nose. In those days, I couldn't do that at all. So it's, you know, really, really interesting things, which is why I see cancer as being a positive experience for me, because I've learned so much about my body. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was some of the other aspects, and one of them was around this particular drug, the steroid. I was going to do a talk at Warwick to some other folks, academics and everything, called Des Hewitt, Professor on Steroids. Because this is what it did to me. And it's a brilliant drug, dexamethasone, but it really has an impact on you. So I remember the doctor at Burton saying, I don't like to give people steroids late in the evening because it can lead to something called steroidal psychosis. So for instance, you can very often lose sleep. So when I was on steroids, I know there's been twice, so that time there, and then I had a second brain tumour at the back of my brain, just over a year or so ago now, I was literally getting 1 hour a night sleep. So steroids have a massive impact on your sleep. I became incredibly active, like at work and everything. So it's literally, you know, when people say you're on steroids, like you can do anything. It was like, I think there's a film, I can't remember what it's called, I think it's called Limitless, where someone has this drug and they have these like superhuman powers. That was me! And I thought I'd become an artist even, so I remember drawing that picture of me, and that was me at the time. You know, I mean, I wasn't quite a psychotic person or anything like that, but that, you know, that sense of like a real sort of ever-presentness and sort of buzziness about you. So when I had a second brain tumour back here and I was on the steroids again, I literally wrote up 3 research projects and got together another book proposal following another one we'd done here. And I was like so productive. But then when you come off it, because steroids are an artificial version of a steroid that you naturally have in your brain called cortisol. And of course, if you pump your brain full of synthetic stuff, the natural stuff doesn't produce as much as normal. So you then go into this withdrawal symptoms from steroids, which is about the bleakest time I think I've ever been on. And my wife at the time, because I was literally, I couldn't eat, I was not sleeping at all. I would go for a shower in the morning, I'd have to have a sleep after that. And I really am a keen runner. I love to go for a walk with a dog and all this sort of stuff. I couldn't go out at all. I literally went for a run once, and I literally had to pick up each leg and put one in front of the other to go running. And that sort of went off after about a month or so, so it's not a permanent thing. But the power of these drugs is amazing. And I think the doctors, when they do all this stuff about informed consent, and I remember them when they took my kidney out, which they did here, where the cancer was on the bottom of the kidney. You're in the hospital, they draw an arrow here to indicate which one they're going to take out, which I thought, well, that seems a bit medieval, that does, doesn't it? But what they don't tell you is about the effect of some of the medication. So one of the other things that happens is if you have anything done to your head, your brain, very often you get epilepsy after that. Yeah. So the following Saturday, I went to, there's a place near called Bretby, just near to Burton. There's a nursery in there which has got a lovely cafe there. So I decided in my post-steroidal state that I wanted to do loads of gardening. So I went there with my daughter Nanette and her boyfriend Jacob, and I wanted to buy loads of stuff, and we had some food there. And I had some apple pie, which I'm known for loving apple pie. And I had the thing like this, and it was near my mouth, and I just got stuck. And I sort of was conscious, but not unconscious. And I realised, a bit like, your computer, when it goes into that bit of a death spiral, when it gets stuck, and it's, what's it called, buffering. Yeah. My brain was doing exactly that. And that was called, some might call it a seizure. So you can have lots of different types of epilepsy. Because I've worked in a special school, I used to have children have the full tonic seizure, which is, shaking on the ground, all this type of stuff. But I'd also seen what's called, that's called a grand mal, a large bad thing, if you like, in French. What I'd had is called a petit mal, a small absence. And again, that was very much linked to this operation I had on my brain. So I then, literally within a couple of days or so, had some medication. And although on that day that I went to that nursery in Burton, I had 20 seizures in one day, literally for a few seconds at a time. And it was that sort of absence seizures, they would call it. As soon as I started taking the medication, it completely went. So that was one thing. The other thing that I have to do as well is, because I've taken steroids, one thing that I do is, because I'm on a particular treatment at the moment, I have to, with it likely being Macmillan's booklet, this one here, I have to keep my temperature, my blood pressure, and my sugar levels, because the steroid tablets made me go diabetic as well. So they gave me this little sort of machine, and you prick your finger and you put it on this sort of strip. And at the time, it said hi. And I thought, well, that's a lovely machine. And I thought just saying hello to me. Actually, what it was saying is, this is going above the maximum. So normally, your sugar level should be about 6 or whatever the sort of units are. And mine were 35 because of this steroid dexamethasone. So dexamethasone, like most steroids, encourages your liver to release a lot more glucose into the blood, which is why your sugar levels go up. But because your sugar levels go up, the fantastic relationship between your kidney, your lungs and your heart, the lungs push your blood with higher pressure through your kidneys, which can sometimes lead to other sort of complications, sometimes with your eyes and this sort of stuff. In my case as well, because particularly kidney cancer could cause the red blood cells to become a bit stickier, it also gave me a blood clot in my leg. So you can see on the right hand side, that was me on a Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock with the local GP saying, Des, could you send me a picture of your legs? Because I said, oh, this one here seems a bit more swollen compared to the other leg. He said, well, just send me a picture, because that doesn't sound good at all. So he looked at that, he said, no, your left-hand leg definitely looks swollen there. That's a deep vein thrombosis. In itself, you can have these sort of blockages in your veins all the time, and your blood normally just takes it away naturally. But the problem is, because your leg veins get wider as they go up the leg, sometimes parts of this blockage can come away, and sometimes it can go into your lungs, where it causes what's called a pulmonary embolism, or into your brain, which will give you a stroke of some sort of kind. So that's why they always want to look at that very, very quickly. So literally within sort of 3 or 4 hours, I was off to Derby Hospital again to have that sort of checked out. So as a result of that, I have to inject myself every day, which I did dutifully before I came out tonight, in my stomach. And that sounds like a really bad thing, but it's literally just straight in like that and into a sort of sharps container. So that was my story up until about May 2022, after I had my kidney taken out. That was all fine. It's really uncomfortable to start with. I remember being in hospital in Derby, and at one point I had something called fentanyl, which I think is the most powerful form of morphine you can have. And I was sort of coming out of that, and then just set up to this sort of sidewall to recover from the operation. Lying down, and at that time, just literally put my hands anywhere near my abdomen like this was like just really painful. So I said, nurse, have you got any pain relief? So they came along, and you've normally got like an extra thing in your arm where they can put some morphine. They gave me a couple of shots of morphine. So I went off to sleep. And I was lying there like this, it was sort of fairly quiet. And I sort of woke up with a start, and there was this really, really, really old man looking over me, like old Father Tiresias himself, like death with his scythe waiting to take me away. And that was definitely me seeing things. In the same way that when my mum was in hospital and she was on morphine, she could see all of her family and her mum at the bottom of the bed. And I found that's a fairly common sort of thing when you're on these very, very strong drugs. And I sort of looked at this person, which is like, if you could think of the oldest person you've ever seen, that was a person staring into my eyes. I went, like this. And then this person went away. But, that I've just found that fascinating. One of the books I'd loved reading as a teenager, and later on when I got more interested in psychology, was a book called a psychologist called Oliver Sacks, called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat.
I've read the book.
Which is brilliant.
Absolutely unbelievable.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And he's the man who, there's a film called Awakenings with Robin Williams, which is about the great Spanish flu epidemic of 1919, where, can you believe it, 23 million people died, a lot more than COVID-19. And he made this film about this experience that he had working in psychiatric institutions where people who've suffered from this particular disease, which obviously would have affected their brain as well, would have no language, would not be able to move around very well. And he found that there's a certain thing which my mum had, because she had Parkinson's as well, called dopamine, which helps you to, all the kind of things to work properly in your brain again. And then he also worked out, there's the nurse who worked with him, but by putting music on, the people would move around the room so much more easily. Which is that fascinating? So I'm a real fan of art, creativity, drama, and physical activity, because I think that can release you in ways that, you know, intellectual activities can't do sometimes. Hence why, you know, doing sketches and this sort of thing. I'm no artist at all, but I've always loved going to the new, what's it called, the new, the galleries, the art gallery in Leicester, New Walk Gallery.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a permanent exhibition there about German expressionist art. And at the time, I fancied myself as a German expressionist. So I thought I'd do a self-portrait, and that was me in that, about day 1 or 2 of cancer. And it was really therapeutic, actually. And I've got I normally use an iPad tablet type thing, which has got like Sketch Pro on there, so you can do stuff on your laptop with a laptop pen. But actually, doing stuff with a pencil, my God, it's amazing. I mean, literally this week, that's something I did last night.
Wow.
And then I got interested in anatomy, so I thought, do you know what? I'm going to draw my kidney. So there's my kidney, and there's the tumour at the bottom. So it's always at the back of the kidney and at the bottom, and because it was in that position, it's very, very difficult to get to. So they said, do you know what, Des? We're just going to whip out your whole kidney. So I think it's a really great thing for anyone who's a patient in this sort of situation to give them their freedom. But I also think it's really important in how we treat each other as well. So just moving on a few stages. So back in January 23, which was last year, I found that I was having some difficulty talking. So I was doing something called cluttering, which is where the sort of consonants particularly get sort of mixed up together. I was having difficulty swallowing, and most embarrassingly at all, as the nurse said, you had writer's block when you're going for a wee. Which is like, you want to go for a wee, but nothing comes out.
Yes, been there, done that.
And it's not, and you know, if you ever go to a football match and there's like 20 men lined up in the urinals, normally at this end there's the oldest people down to the youngest ones at that end, and the older you are, the longer it takes to go for a wee. And I was thinking, oh, maybe this is just me. Even when we were just talking about prostate cancer a moment ago, and I thought, is this prostate cancer? So I said, please, can you do a prostate check on me? Which for men is a finger up your bum, and then feeling the sort of back of the prostate to make sure it's nice and round. It felt to me like the guy was tickling my tonsils. It was got so high, but it wasn't quite that bad. But they found it wasn't that, but what it was is at the back of my brain, so this is the bottom right-hand picture, on something called the pons, which is the hind part of your brain. It's a bit that sort of acts as the relay between the main part of your brain and the rest of your body, so it acts as a kind of connector, if you like, between the sort of key top-level messages and sort of distribution around the body. There was a 3 millimetre tumour starting. So obviously that started from the kidney, swirled around through the bloodstream or the other functional streams and stuff. And it started, so I'm trying to knock the glass over here. It's at the back here, that's the before, and this is the after. You can't really see it too well there, but where there's that white bit and a sort of gap there, that's where the tumour was. And it became 9 millimetres long in 2 months. So they said, oh, Desmond, we think we need to do something about this. And I remember seeing this fantastic Spanish consultant in Nottingham. Every single doctor I've been treated by comes from another country. I'm really proud of that. I can say I've been treated by a Spanish doctor, someone with a British Asian background. So at a time, well, actually my wife is doing her PhD, which she's just submitted on refugees and the asylum policy and this type of thing. I'm very proud that we've got some fantastic people in our hospitals, very often coming from different countries. And I also had a nurse in Burton who was from the Democratic Republic of Congo, DKR, which is a very troubled place. And I had a whole hour discussion with her in French, which that's her first language. And she told me about how her two boys had gone to Nottingham University after she'd arrived in England and how good they were doing. Do you know what? I felt so proud about that. And she said, oh, that's the first time I've spoken French to anyone for like 2 or 3 years or so. And that did a lot for me, I think. So I think giving to other people, treating them decently, treating them with compassion is really, really important if you're a patient. I don't particularly like it. I can understand sometimes, but when I went in to have a check of my kidneys for something, the nurse said, she said, I've just spoken to someone who's just been shouting at us all because his taxi to bring him for his dialysis, which was a free taxi, was 10 minutes late and he was shouting at everyone. And I thought, do you really need to do that? So I think actually treating people with decency is really, really important. Which is why, having had all this sort of stuff sorted out in my head, so I had to go to Nottingham, the city hospital there, to have that thing. My kids like to call it a GIMP mask. I don't really know what a GIMP is. But it's basically a flat piece of nylon, which is heated up in a water tray, and it's pressed onto your head, and they put a little hole there and a hole there, and it's bolted down onto a sort of CT type scan, which has got lots of different rays going all in the same direction. Your head can't move at all, and it focuses lots of radioactive X-ray beams onto the tumour, and that's left my body within 2 months. So it was incredibly effective. Again, I had the same sort of withdrawal symptoms from steroids and everything. But this is just really following through with the focus not just on me as a patient, but me as a person, and me trying to put all this stuff into practice with people like Brittany and others as well, because I think disability is a really important thing for society. I really do believe that diverse groups make better groups. So I mean, I've worked in commerce and business before, so they say that actually if you've got a more diverse board, like of trustees, you get much better decisions. There's been huge progression, but not enough, in terms of women in education. I mean, your PhD was all about women in education in Colville. It's not been enough. But I think that, there's some very positive stories. I've always referred to a great American person called Hale Zukas. If you look him up, it's Hale, Hale, Zukas, Zukas. He was born with cerebral palsy in a motorised wheelchair for the whole of his life. He was non-verbal. He had cognitive ability. His mum did everything she could for him to give him a decent life. And they worked out that if he had a sort of helmet type thing on, a bit like a Dalek, with a long stem on, and a sort of a square with all the letters on, a few sort of common words, and he'd point his head at these things, and he'd be able to communicate via that. And he went on to study, got a degree in Russian and maths at Berkeley University in California. And there's no stopping him from there. He had a sit-in at the Californian state government's buildings. And he then went on, because he used to go on the metro, the Californian metro I think it was,
and he could go to a certain point, but there were stairs there. So he helped them redesign the whole California and San Francisco Bay underground system. And what an amazing bloke. So again, look for the ability, not the disability. So I think that's why, let's talk about disability. I'm just thinking through at the moment, I'm writing a sort of follow-up book to this one, inclusion, with someone who's a chief executive of a group of schools. And I was saying to her today, I said, Nick, what do you think as a teacher? Do you think you should share details of your disability with your children? Because when I was in that time when I couldn't speak properly, I apologised to my PGCE students because I said, I'm really, really sorry. I just heard that I've got another tumour coming off my brain. I want to keep going, which I did do. And they were fantastic about it. But I talked to a few people about, should I tell them or not? And my boss said, Katie said, just be open about it. When I told them, they clapped me. And this big rugby player type bloke said, and I said, I apologise to all of you if I've been, able to communicate properly or anything. This big rugby player guy came up to me and put his arm around me and said, Des, you've got nothing to apologise for. And I thought, he's putting into practice what I want. Always treat people decently. And I think, I don't know if that, I think actually one of the things that we would talk about probably in inclusion and motivation, I talked about school leadership as well, is the importance of IQ, intelligence, but also EQ, emotional intelligence, and CQ, what I might call cultural intelligence. And that's important for people in health. But also, I just talked about how I was helped by an amazing Spanish doctor. My consultant is from an British Indian background. The nurses I have are Thai and Filipino, and some from England as well. I'm really, really proud of those people. And I think that understanding of different cultures is really, really important as well. So the sort of things, I'll talk about these sort of things up here, so I've talked about some of those as I've gone through. There is a programme on Radio 4 called Just One Thing with Michael Mosley. I'm not going to do that, which is where Michael Mosley says, if you eat beetroot, everything's going to be okay. Because life is complex, and one thing is not the solution, it's not the silver bullet to everything. So, I've always taught mindfulness and meditation to my students on our teacher training courses. Some people will say that's just a sticking plaster for a broken system. So, don't take away from this the fact I've suggested calming the mind is great as a way of coping with cancer and that sort of diagnosis and difficult, complex illnesses. It's certainly not a solution or a cure, but it is a way of helping, I think. I think I quite like using this. I know Brittany will have come across this before. This is when we talk about behaviour in school. We often say what you see on the tip of the iceberg is a behaviour. What's underneath the water is the reason for it.
Yeah.
Might be something at home. Might be kids who haven't got a bed to sleep on. Might be a child who hasn't got any food. And the same with patients, I think, and the staff that you're dealing with as well. We very often just show what's on the surface, and we don't really understand that. But I think that the power of a great practitioner, health practitioner, is to find out what's underneath the surface. And actually, I love the way my consultant says, he says, I just want to explain this because I know you like to hear about the latest research on this, that, or the other. I think of treating people individually like that is such an important thing.
Yeah.
And it leads me on to that, which I remember seeing, actually was a piece about cancer practitioners and cancer treatment in California. And it was saying, should we show people sympathy, empathy, or compassion? What do you think is the difference between those?
Well, to me, sympathy is a problem. It's you're distant.
It's your problem, Melissa.
Empathy is where you're almost in the shoes of that person. So it's a much closer identity.
Compassion for me, it would be top of my list.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's when cancer patients looked at those three statements. They said, we don't want sympathy. That's sort of someone taking pity on you in its worst form.
Compassion,
Yeah.
yeah.
Empathy is where you put yourself in someone else's position,
Yeah.
which people are saying these days, there's less empathy in society. Compassion, I think, is putting yourself in someone else's position and wanting to take some of their suffering away from them.
It's almost sharing.
Exactly.
It is.
Yeah.
And we need more compassion in society, don't we? I think this is a hub of compassion. Colville can be compassionate. You are compassionate. So I completely agree with this. It's, again, not trying to proselytise or convert you or anything like that, I never do that. But at the heart of Buddhism is always not your own happiness, but other people's happiness. You know, if you, the greatest happiness in the world comes from wishing other people's happiness, not your own. Which I think I might even have a quote up here. There we go. All the happiness in the world comes from wishing the happiness of others. And then, you know, Buddhism talks about the six perfections. So, you know, morally disciplines, calming the mind, wisdom. And then all the unhappiness in the world comes from focusing on yourself as opposed to others. And that's not to say you shouldn't care for yourself, because of course you should. I think there's a nice metaphor that if you're an ambulance driver, if you forget to pump the tyres up on your ambulance, you're not going to save anyone's life at all, are you? So you do have to take care of yourself, but ultimately life really is about other people. And if we have a society, and I think it starts with you as an individual, but in little tiny groups like this as well, if we can do that compassionate approach. And compassionate is a pretty non-negotiable sort of thing that most people agree on, I think. So I think it's worth going for. And I think, you know, unhappiness generally comes from focusing on yourself, development of anger. I'll tell you how to develop happiness, but also how to develop anger. I think I always used to explain to students how anger happens and how frustration happens. It's basically like a spot on your face. And it goes something like this. How we react to the world. Here we go. Let me just go through this bit. So, jump on anger and hatred. I've had, I don't know what it's to do with the medication I'm on at the moment, a funny sort of spot up here which I keep on picking away at. And I keep on focusing on it. And it annoys me. And I'll sort of pick it off like this. It doesn't bleed or anything like that. Then it comes back. So I see it as negative. I'm not particularly worried about fashion, as you can tell, or my looks, as you can tell. But I've exaggerated its bad qualities. I can think of people I've worked with and I thought, oh my God, what an absolute pain that person is. And I focus on their negative qualities. Oh my God, this person is so autistic. You know, how am I going to deal with that? And I've been a senior manager in university and schools as well. I think I'm quite good at having difficult conversations, which I think is all about listening. So again, you'll see from this as well, that there's a big focus, I think, as patients, as practitioners, and as family members as well. The most important thing with any sort of difficulty like this is listening. And I've actually brought some of the skills from the Samaritans in what they call the listening wheel, which teaches us how to listen. So one of my last things I did in a group of schools in Coventry was to explore how we can, looking at the antidotes to anger and hatred, if you like, and how we can develop more positive things. So compassion, as I've already said, looking at the success of other people, not looking at their failures. How many times have I done that? How many times have my work colleagues said, I can't believe that person's getting a bonus this year. What have they done for that? I also think patience, which is one of the other 6 perfections in Buddhism. Patience, effort, giving, calming the mind, wisdom, moral discipline, those are 6 perfections. Patience is really important. You know, as a sort of growing up as a Christian, that people have said turning the other cheek. I was never sure which cheek they meant when they said that, but you know what I mean. But patience is really important in life, is knowing when not to retaliate. So if your taxi's late for 5 minutes before your treatment at hospital or something, don't have a go at the nurse. Or if you are high on steroids like I was, I remember once, I think it was just around the time I had this COVID, oh no, just after that, I remember going to the top of the stairs and shouting, "I'm sorry, I can't help having cancer!" And like just being really frustrated like that. And actually, of all the people in our family, not me, it's been my wife who's been most worried. Not particularly about me, although that's definitely the case, but the practical, oh my God, I've got to take you to the hospital for these days there, or what are we going to do if the money runs out on that thing there? So actually, I think all these sort of things are really, really important. The people around you as a patient. And I think, you know, if there's one area, you know, I remember phoning Macmillan's actually, and they were superb, offering help. When the Samaritans folk knew that I had a sort of life-limiting illness, they gave me a Samaritan myself who would phone me like every few weeks and ask me how I was getting on and everything. But as a wise Buddhist monk said to me once, if you got a problem and you could do something about it, do something about it. If you can't do something about it, don't worry. And that sounds like a simplistic sort of thing, and I completely understand. So on Friday, actually tomorrow, I'm getting a phone call from the consultants telling me the latest scan that I've had. And people often get what they call scanxiety, which is like, oh my God, what are they going to find this time? Because normally, I normally have like a sort of an anniversary where I get a new tumour. And I just think, well, sod it, you know, if something happens, it happens sort of thing. The doctors will say to you, just take each day as it comes. So there's no point really worrying about it. But, you know, if you can do something about it, do it. If you can't, don't worry about it. So actually, the one thing I wanted to show you was the Samaritans. This is the training they do for you, how to listen. I mean, I was always against suicide and still am. It used to be a criminal offence, which is people where they were said to have committed suicide, which was an offence, which I think stopped in about the 1960s. The Samaritans, they always say, have you asked the suicide question? Which is, you know, when you speak to someone on the phone, have you made like firm plans about taking your life? And like being really upfront about it.
So my family have done that.
Yes, yeah, and it's incredible. Yeah. I know I went to a thing in Head Teachers in Warwickshire where they said there was 110 suicides in a particular period of time, and they said normally at least 100 people is affected by each of those suicides. So, you know, that's thousands of people have been affected. And the Samaritans say, you know, we never try and stop people committing suicide. What we are there for is to listen to people. Because actually, if people have made firm plans, it's very difficult to change those sort of things.
You can't get over it, it's members of the family.
Exactly, yeah. It's very, very difficult. And actually, I found this listening wheel, which is what you're coached into using when you pick up the phone and listen to people. I'm actually doing it with colleagues, and I think I've sort of done it naturally in my life as well, is how do you listen to people? So, you know, I've had sometimes where I've had like MPs on the phone moaning about something that's happened to one of our students on our course, or I once had Jeff Hoon, the Cabinet's Minister for something, phoning me from the Westminster about something on a course. And actually the first thing you need to do is listen. And when people are really wound up, very often you can't do much about it, but they just want someone to listen to them. Which again was where I think Macmillan is superb about listening to people, and the Samaritans are as well.
I did a course some years ago when I was working, and it was about dealing with customer complaints. And the first thing is don't interrupt, listen, acknowledge their complaint. take it seriously.
Yeah.
Don't ever say anything like, "Oh, that's nothing."
Yeah, that's right.
But you're right. It's the listening and acknowledging, so they think, "Thank goodness, I'm talking to somebody who's taking me seriously." Who's good. And the other thing I used to try and do, as if it was appropriate, summarise what they said, and then say, "Right, this is what I'm going to do about it," and then go back to them if that was appropriate.
Yes.
With what you've done, what you said you do, and follow it through that way. And it's quite interesting, like you say, it's a lesson for life.
Yeah, definitely. The best training I went on at Warwick University for managers was how to have difficult conversations, and I've worked with universities all over Britain and with Hong Kong now as well. And I would say to them, just with your colleagues and your students, teach them how to have a difficult conversation, which is acknowledging what other people have said. The most important thing in English, British English, if there's anything more than a 6-second silence, it's very uncomfortable for people. Not in all languages and all cultures, but it is in British English. So using silence as a way to encourage other people to speak and to give them the space to speak is really, really important. And exactly as you said, summarising what people have said. So every conversation is a story. It's got a start, a middle, and an end. You probably don't want to be speaking to someone for like 10 hours. No. Some people want to be speaking for 10 hours. So actually, how to sort of close down something, and summarising is a way of doing that. But how to clarify, how to reflect on what people have said, so actually using other people's words is really important. So, you said to me that you feel like this about something, or you said to me that you're struggling with this part of the work that you're doing at the moment. Actually, that's really useful for people when you're using the words that they say. So language matters, and how you listen to people does as well. So talked about anger, happiness. I'm very happy if you want to circulate the slides, put it on your website after this so people can see that. But there's also this is something that's used in education at a school in London. I think, Brittany, you'll have come across it, School 21, which is a school that focuses on oracy. And it particularly focuses on listening skills. And this is one of their sort of training sessions they've done down there. It's just taken pretty much from the Samaritan's approach, which is how to listen to people. So using the listening wheel. So again, I would encourage that for anyone who's a family member, but also for patients. I think wouldn't it be really interesting if Macmillan, for instance, could produce a little online video. So when you become type 2 diabetic, as I am, they give you access to diabetic education, which is a national education online thing. They give you a mentor, and it teaches you brilliant things about your relationship with food. What things work with food? How does your insulin work with food? How does metformin, which is a drug that most diabetics take? What can you do? Why is drinking really important? Why are fluids important? What are some of the things to look out for in your your legs or your things of pins and needles and all these type of things? So that's a fantastic thing that the NHS has, and I think these things that help individuals to help themselves are really important. And that's another part of something I want to say, which actually Brittany and I spoke about in the book that we did together, which is called Engaging, Motivating and Empowering Learners in School. I would say it's about all citizens, everyone's society. We really want people to be able to take charge of themselves, of course be compassionate to other people, to other patients, to the staff that work in hospitals who have got a tremendously difficult job at the moment. But also, to determine a certain way that how your own life goes. So that big spiral that I showed you at the start, it's not set out beforehand. The fact that my dad was a ticket collector on a railway station hasn't stopped me becoming a professor. Not that, that's the best thing in life, but I'd look to people like Brittany, who's a fantastically brilliant teacher, who worked at King Edward's, wasn't it? Now a great CPD Herald and Talksparrow, if you like, in Lincolnshire, and PhD student from working around the Colburn area. You know, to see how successful people have come from all backgrounds is absolutely brilliant, I think. So I think one of the things that we would say, which is a really interesting as well, because this protects your mental health, and I'll show you an NHS programme. It's, again, an online thing called the 5 a Day for Wellbeing and Mental Health. And it sort of is focused on this theory. It's American, a couple of American psychologists, Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, and they talk about self-determination. Personally, I think that's what Colville Can is all about. There's 3 elements to this, which is important for any successful organisation or individual. We're all socially connected. We need to be connected with other people. So, like when you're in school and you start to like go into yourself and just stay in your own classroom all the time and stop going to the staff room, that's when you can, you know, go downhill a bit. So when you become disconnected and isolated. When you feel out of control, you don't have any control of your life, that's when we feel, you know, difficulties arise. So autonomy or what we call agency is really, really important in life. And then I think a sense of growth. Whatever it is, whether it's what you learn, whether it's a skill. Last week I was writing a chapter on more able and gifted children. And I was thinking, actually, everyone's got talents. Everyone's got gifts. But how can we realise it? So I think Richard was just walking on the corridor with a couple of people from the space group in Leicester who were doing a project with a lad where he'd made something and he was taking it home, I think. The people from the Leicester space place. Yeah. And so again, you know, whatever your talent is, to get that, you know, realised in whatever form is a great thing for everyone. So I actually think, what can people who've got like a particular illness or difficult condition, what can they do that's positive? I always wear this Garmin watch thing. People say, "Oh, what are you doing wearing that thing?" And then a normal watch as well. I quite like to count my steps. I quite like to go running and do sort of different sorts of forms of running. When I was in hospital for like 4 or 5 days at a time, I was looking at my step counter, which is normally about 6,000 or 7,000, maybe 10,000 a day or something. It was 900 steps a day. So I'd literally lying on the bed and then going off to the loo, going back to the loo, maybe going to the shower and back. And I thought, that can't be healthy for you. So I did say to some people, I said, well, to these medical people I was working with at work, wouldn't it be great if we could think about how to do relevant and appropriate exercise as a patient in hospital? How could you develop exercise in a ward such that you don't lose people, but then people actually are still functioning, so that, you know, very often if you are just lying there all the time, that's when you will get a DVT. So I think if there are things that you can do to help yourself, it's really, really important. I refer to the NHS 5 a Day for Health and Wellbeing. This is a great mental health thing for all of you. We use this with all of our students at Warwick University, but I would say for everyone, it's really important. The 3 things that I showed you before, being connected, having decisions that you can make yourself, having a sense of growth, those are all written into the 5 a Day for mental health and wellbeing. If you just Google that, you'll find that it's a free thing. It's not a sort of taught thing. Just putting it into practice yourself. Connecting with other people. So, you know, you can tell where people get isolated. Actually, I think physically it has a big impact on you. Learning something new, whatever that is. When you're getting on a bit like me, I'm a grand old age of 61, and my wife is 60 next Friday. We're always thinking, well, how can we learn new things? How can we keep growing in whichever way that is? Being aware of your own feelings, I think, is really important. And actually, I personally think being physically active, as this says, is really important as well. So one of the key ways for me to get back to health and well-being after all my illnesses and everything was walking with my 60th birthday present, which is a chocolate Labrador called Mabel. And last, when was it, about March, April, after I come out of hospital then, I was walking literally about 60 miles a week or so. When I was 60, I ran 60 miles in 6 days and raised money for the brain tumour charity, because I thought that was a good thing to do. But actually, physical activity is a really good thing to do. So what I would say for any patients, any family, and definitely for patients, so this is not just a sort of, this is what health practitioners need to do more in the future, because I think they are really good listeners. But for patients, I think it's really important to be a good listener as well. For your family, the brunts that a family takes when there's like a difficult diagnosis like this, of any health condition or any challenge like there might be in social work as well, is incredible. So learning how to listen to other people is important for all of us, I think. And I think if there's a takeaway from this that I'd like all of you to do is to go away, Google empathic listening, and you'll come across the listening wheel and try and put that into your lives. And if we do that, I don't know what the verb is, but Colville will, not Colville can. But thank you ever so much. Hopefully that's long enough for you to hear my story, not to focus too much on me, because I wanted it to be about things that would be interesting for you. But we also thought at the end, if there are any questions, if you've got any thoughts yourself, any other areas you'd like to explore, very happy to hear those, if any of you want to share any of those now. So it's entirely up to you.
Did you have any other family that had cancer?
Yeah, both my mum and dad had cancer. So I've had a genetic check.
Yeah.
So they'll look, because obviously they'll take the tumour out.
Yeah.
So basically I've had a kidney tumour in my brain,
Yeah.
here, some cells here and here as well.
Yeah.
But when they genetically checked it, which they do in Nottingham, they said that it's not a genetically related thing.
No.
So my dad had prostate, which spread to his lungs. He was a smoker for about 64 years as well, so I think that might have contributed. My mum had skin cancer, breast cancer, and ovarian cancer, not particularly linked. So in my case, I've got 2 daughters in their late 20s and a son who's 25. They said they should just go for their mammogram about 10 years earlier. So go when they're about 30 as opposed to 40.
Yeah.
But I have seen the inside of every one of my offices.
Yeah.
So at 55, I would encourage everyone to go for the bowel check, where they stick a camera up your backside.
Yeah.
So I've seen that part of my anatomy. And actually all those things, whether it's a smear test, a mammogram, all these sort of things, and a lot of men think, oh my God, having someone put their finger on your backside, must be terrible. It's actually not painful at all. And I would encourage all men to have their prostate checked, because it's literally a 5-minute check. And for women, with a mammogram as well, so many people that I know have, been recently diagnosed with breast cancer. When I go to the clinic for CT scans in Derby, everyone has got a similar birth date as me, sometime in the early 60s or late 50s or so. So I think, if we can use all of these kind of diagnostic tools to help us and to be aware of your own things, just a bit like being aware of your own feelings, I think being aware of your own body as well is really, really important as well. So thank you very much for listening.